Well, speaking of things happening constantly, one big one that I think did impact us nationally and at the local level was the recent midterm elections. Apparently, a lot of big surprises there. Um, I have my own thoughts, but I'll defer to you first. Like, what was your experience with that, and what was the local fallout for that one?
Well, locally, we had a 37% turnout here in Callaway County, which kind of surprised me in a way, because leading up to the election, there had been more buzz on some of the national races and the state races, but not as much on some of the local races. We had a contested sheriff's race, but we had a lot of, down ballot non-contested races. But we had 37% turnout, which I thought was pretty good. Statewide, it was 50%, which also is pretty good for a non-presidential year. This was the midterms, of course. Um, but I thought that was a good sign that people are still interested in voting and in democracy.
The big story coming out of it was, and of course, it's the sexier one. The polls, they got it wrong. They got it wrong. They always love to say
Right.
that. And whenever they start saying that, my first question is always like, well, did they really? Like, when it comes to polling, one of my trusted sources is still Nate Silver from 538.com. Just because he always, like, they have their model, which I feel like is pretty accurate. It takes everything into account. But on top of that, they also offer their own analysis. And one of the things he kept saying this time was like, I think we might be lagging. Like, what we're showing is possibly the feeling of about 2 or 3 weeks before, but we're just seeing it now. And so,
Right.
yeah, consistently, like I remember the one they loved saying the polls were wrong was when the 2016 presidential election, and I just still remember I kept looking at Nate Silver the whole time. He's like, "No, this is actually how it could go." So,
Right.
what were there any surprises as far as like people thought would happen there in your part of the woods that didn't?
No, not really. I think it went pretty much as planned over here. The big race, obviously, was the 42nd district judge race with Jamie Jamison and Andrea Moore. Um, that one ended up, that was also controversial because of all the issues that Jamison's been facing uh, with the Judicial Conduct Commission investigation. Um, so I don't think that was really all that much of a surprise. That was just one that had a lot of interest. Of course, the abortion issue, Amendment 2, statewide, the vote was no. I believe Callaway County in this end of the state was more of a yes vote on that one. But I don't think we had a whole lot of surprises. It was, to me, the election coverage. I took students to the courthouse to cover. What surprised me was it took so long for the returns to come in. And it's one of those things of election night, you never know. Sometimes you think, oh, this is going to be a quick night. As soon as I always tell the kids it's going to be a quick night, that's when it turns out to be a long night. We had, I believe, 6 election centers plus the early voting and the absentee voting. And it just took a little bit of time for all of that to come in. But I was not all that surprised with the races, honestly.
I've been wondering if that's going to be, is that like our new normal now? Because I distinctly remember times when there were always like one or two that were taking longer, but for the most part, everything was wrapped up on election night. Whereas now it's taking so much longer, like days, sometimes even weeks. And
Right.
is that going to continue forward, or I'm just wondering what's going to happen there.
I think that's a good question. It does seem like it takes us a lot longer. One thing that did kind of bother me as a former journalist and also just as a person was, the AP and others tend to call racist pretty early in Kentucky when, um, the polls have closed in the eastern part of the state before they close down here. And that's always kind of bothered me because, what if a voter sees, that, the AP is already calling it one way or the other? Could that deter them from voting? So that's always kind of bothered me. They called it pretty early for Rand Paul, and our polls were still open. There were people still in line at one of our polling places at 6 o'clock, which I thought, wow.
I heard about that happening in a lot of places. Here in my home, where I live now in Clarksville, Tennessee, that was happening. Polls were
Yeah.
closed. There were lines out the door.
Yeah, I thought that was great. And I don't know if it's because we had smaller, less polling places or if more people voted. I personally did the early voting. I've done that since they started offering it. I absolutely love early voting.
Me too. Yeah, I do that all the
Because
time.
you can go like when you have that time, and as a journalist, if you're in the journalism world, of course, election day is a very busy day. Um, and even as a journalism professor, it's a bit busy day because I was getting ready to take students there. So I appreciated having an opportunity to go on a Friday afternoon when things were calm in my life and I could get into the polling place, do my civic responsibility. And then election day, my Tuesday, Thursdays, I teach typically 3 classes. So it doesn't leave a whole lot of time to run out. One of my classes goes until 4:30, almost 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Um, so I really appreciate early voting. I hope it's something that continues.
I'm a huge fan. It's it's so convenient, so helpful. Yeah, I want it to be expanded and made more available to more people. I think it's yeah.
I think
I'm
so.
an advocate of it.
Yeah, I am too. I really enjoyed it. And, I've talked to a lot of people who did participate in early voting. And the same thing, they were able to go because their work schedule freed up at a certain time. And, it got them to the poll at the time. And I liked it. I really like it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's I see no reason why it should be an issue. Like I fully support really all of them, like absentee voting, mail-in. I'm in favor of all of that. But the criticisms people have, it's like, okay, I can kind of see it. I don't agree with you, but I see it. But with early voting, I don't see why there should be any issue with that. To me, that's just it's you have your poll workers there. It's on what's the word I'm looking for? Public property. I mean, everything about it, like it's just a perfect setup. So yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.